By the time the tension between Amelia and Daniel reached its quiet breaking point, neither of them could pretend the shift was subtle anymore, because what had once been disciplined distance had turned into something fragile and electric, something that lingered in the silence between words and in the space where their hands almost touched but never quite did. And though both understood the danger of crossing that line, the reality of constant threats and shared vulnerability had woven their lives together in ways neither anticipated. The escalation came suddenly when a verified security breach revealed that someone inside Amelia's company had been leaking confidential schedule information, narrowing the threat from faceless intimidation to calculated proximity. And Daniel's protective instincts intensified immediately, restricting her movements further and insisting on isolation protocols that made Amelia feel more trapped than protected, igniting a confrontation that neither could avoid. She accused him of treating her like a liability instead of a leader, her voice sharp with frustration and fear, while Daniel countered with unwavering resolve, reminding her that danger did not care about pride or independence, and that his only priority was keeping her alive. But beneath his controlled tone was something deeper, a strain that betrayed how personal the responsibility had become. The argument ended abruptly when a suspicious vehicle was reported circling her penthouse building, forcing immediate lockdown procedures. And in the rush of heightened security, emotions ran raw, leaving them standing in the dimly lit safe room once again, the confined space amplifying everything they had been trying to suppress. Amelia, exhausted by constant fear and the emotional tension she no longer knew how to manage, finally voiced the truth she had been avoiding, admitting that what frightened her most was not the external threat, but the way she had begun to rely on him, the way his presence had become essential, and how losing him would devastate her more than any corporate scandal or public failure ever could. Daniel stood still, absorbing her confession with a mixture of relief and dread, because hearing the vulnerability in her voice shattered the final wall he had been clinging to. And in that quiet room, filled with low emergency lighting, he admitted that he had crossed the line internally long ago, that protecting her had stopped being just an assignment and had become personal in ways he could not justify, and that every time danger approached, the fear he felt was no longer professional caution, but something far more intimate. The honesty between them hung heavy in the air, fragile and undeniable, and for a moment, neither moved, aware that whatever happened next would redefine everything. But before the moment could evolve into something irreversible, alarms blared again, this time signaling a direct breach attempt in the building's lower levels. An instinct overtook emotion as Daniel shifted back into protective mode, guiding Amelia swiftly through emergency protocols, his focus sharp, movements decisive, yet the awareness of her confession lingered in every glance they exchanged. The breach was contained quickly, revealed to be a desperate but contained attempt by the internal suspect to access restricted areas, and though law enforcement secured the building and apprehended the individual responsible for leaking information, the emotional aftermath proved far more difficult to contain. Back in the quiet of her penthouse, the reality settled over them both that the external threat had been neutralized, but the internal one remained, because acknowledging their feelings meant confronting consequences neither had prepared for. And as Amelia stood by the window, overlooking the Chicago skyline, she felt the weight of choice pressing down on her, knowing that allowing Daniel to remain only her bodyguard would be a lie neither could sustain, yet changing their dynamic risked everything, including his career and her reputation. Daniel approached carefully, no longer hiding the emotion in his expression, and when he spoke, his voice carried a steadiness that came not from discipline, but from decision, telling her that he could step away if that was what she needed, that he would prioritize her safety and future, even if it meant removing himself entirely. And the sacrifice embedded in his words struck her harder than any argument ever had. Amelia turned toward him with clarity she had never felt before, realizing that strength did not mean denying vulnerability, but choosing courage despite it. And she told him that she did not want distance, that she wanted honesty, partnership, and the freedom to choose what they meant to each other beyond titles and assignments. And the quiet resolve in her voice erased the last hesitation between them. Daniel closed the space slowly, deliberately, not as a protector shielding a client, but as a man reaching for a woman who had become the center of his guarded world. And when their hands finally met without restraint, the contact was gentle, yet profound, carrying weeks of tension, fear, trust, and longing. And though the future remained uncertain, the certainty between them felt unbreakable. Chapter 4 closed, not with chaos or danger, but with choice, with two people standing at the edge of change, aware that love born from protection was complicated and risky, yet undeniably real. And as the city lights shimmered outside, Amelia understood that her greatest weakness had also become her greatest strength, because trusting Daniel did not diminish her power, it completed it. And whatever came next, they would face it not as employer and bodyguard, but as equals, bound by something deeper than duty.